You already locked the door. You know you locked it. You watched your hand turn the key. You heard the click. And yet something inside you, something with no voice and no logic, is already pulling you back down the hallway to check it again. This isn't anxiety. This isn't forgetfulness. So, what is it? There is a sensation your brain produces when a task is complete. Not a thought, not a memory. A sensation. A small, quiet neurological signal that says, done, move on. Most people receive it without ever noticing it. They lock the door, the signal fires, and their brain changes gear. The door ceases to exist in their working attention. They leave. Some brains never get the signal, and everything that follows from that is what nobody ever explains properly. Researchers who study this phenomenon gave it a name. They call it a not just right experience. It is not a metaphor, and it is not a personality type. It is a documented, measurable internal state, defined as a subjective sense that something isn't as it should be, even when by every external measure, it is perfectly fine. A study led by researcher Igor Ferrao, examining over 1,000 patients, found this sensation present in 70 to 80% of people who compulsively repeat behaviors. But here is the part that almost no popular content ever mentions. Research published in non-clinical populations found that people with no diagnosis whatsoever commonly experience at least one of these episodes. Does that change how you think about the last time you went back to check something you had already done? This is not a condition that lives on one side of a clear line. It lives on a spectrum, and a significant portion of people who encounter this idea are somewhere on it, without knowing there is even a name for what they feel. So, what is actually happening inside the brain when that signal fails to fire? A neuropsychiatrist named Jeffrey Schwartz at UCLA spent years mapping this exact problem using PET scans. What he found was that a structure deep inside the brain called the caudate nucleus functions, under normal conditions, like an automatic gearbox. It takes the signals from the thinking parts of your brain, filters out the noise, and shifts your attention smoothly from one task to the next. One task closes, the next opens. The transition is seamless. You never even notice it is happening. In some brains, the caudate gets stuck, the gear does not change. The front of the brain, specifically a region called the orbital cortex, which Schwartz identified as the brain's error detection circuit, continues firing a single relentless signal. Something is wrong. Something is wrong. Something is wrong. It does not stop because the task is finished. It stops when it stops at all, only when the caudate finally shifts. And for some brains, that shift requires an action. Check the door, wash the hands, reread the paragraph. Only then does the gear budge. Only then does the signal quiet down. But here is where it gets worse. Have you ever noticed that checking once rarely satisfies it, but checking twice gives you maybe 30 seconds before the doubt returns? That temporary relief is not a solution. It is a trap. Every time you complete the checking behavior to silence the signal, you strengthen the exact neural pathway that generated the demand in the first place. The brain learns that the way to resolve this feeling is to perform the action. So next time, the signal fires faster, the demand comes sooner, the relief lasts a shorter time. You are not fixing the loop, you are tightening it. Researcher Paul Salkowski spent years documenting exactly this mechanism, describing how safety-seeking behaviors in response to threat signals paradoxically confirm to the brain that the threat was real and the action was necessary. Which means the next time the signal fires, the brain treats the demand as even more urgent than before. Now here is the part that most content on this topic completely skips over. Most people assume the checking behavior is driven by fear. Fear of intruders, fear of contamination, fear of something bad happening. And fear is sometimes present. But researcher Linda Sommerfeld at Trent University proposed something that shifted how this whole phenomenon is understood. She identified two completely separate motivators behind these behaviors. One is fear. The other is incompleteness. which is the feeling that something is simply unfinished, not dangerous, not wrong in any identifiable way, just not done, just not right. These are different experiences driven by different parts of the brain. And for a significant number of people, fear is barely involved at all. The door does not feel dangerous. It feels open, even when it is closed. The hands do not feel contaminated. They feel unwashed, even moments after drying. The thought does not feel threatening. It just will not close. Can you see how that distinction completely changes what kind of solution actually helps? Because if the loop is driven by incompleteness rather than fear, then reassuring yourself that nothing bad will happen is solving the wrong problem. Your brain was never worried about the outcome. It was waiting for a signal that never arrived. In early 2026, a research team published findings in the journal Cell that for the first time identified a specific, measurable brain signal associated with this compulsive state in real time. Using electrodes placed in patients with severe treatment-resistant cases, the team recorded abnormally powerful high-frequency activity in a region called the anteromedial orbitofrontal cortex during episodes of compulsive urges. And critically, when that specific activity was disrupted through targeted stimulation, the compulsive urgency dropped rapidly. Not gradually, rapidly. The signal was interrupted, and with it, temporarily the demand. What does this tell you? It tells you that the sensation you feel when something is not done enough is not a thought you can argue with. It is not a memory you can correct. It is a pattern of electrical activity in a specific region of your brain. You cannot think your way out of it. For the same reason you cannot think your way out of a muscle cramp. It is a physical event, wearing the costume of a worry. Understanding this changes how you respond to it. The instinct, when the signal fires, is to check, to go back, to do the thing again and find the relief. And that relief is real. It arrives, for a moment, but every time you follow the signal to its demanded destination, you are sending the brain a confirmation. The signal was right. The action was required. The loop deserves to run again. The research, including Schwartz's own work on self-directed neuroplasticity, suggests the only thing that genuinely weakens the pattern over time is allowing the signal to fire without acting on it, not suppressing the feeling, not arguing with it, not reassuring yourself the door is locked, simply letting the signal exist, naming it for what it is, which is a misfiring error circuit waiting for a gear that is stuck and waiting. The caudate eventually shifts on its own. It does not need the action. It never did. It only needed a brain that finally stopped confirming the loop every time it ran. The door was locked the first time you turned the key. Your brain knew that. It just could not find the signal that would let it believe it.